Well, I think everybody expects you to start off by saying it's really hard because of this. And, you know, when somebody's dyslexic, they do have difficulties, but they also have strengths, and it's important, I think, to mention those as well. Because one of the things about dyslexia is that people often have more imaginative insights, and they might take a different approach from the rest of us, which is generally good. But then it can become less good because then people don't necessarily, the non-dyslexic part of the population, don't necessarily understand how the thought processes have gone and how a person's got from A to B, because many of us might go always the same way, and I've noticed that dyslexic people quite often don't, and think. And then they say, well, obviously because so-and-so, and you think, oh yes, it is obvious and it is better, I just hadn't thought of it. So, you know, it's both a gift and a curse, I think. What I think she's really good at is she can apply what she's learned, but also maybe tweak it a little bit so it's even more useful than you might imagine it would have been from when she found it out. And she therefore creates a sort of coherent picture that makes more sense. And also sometimes with dyslexic people thinking differently, they have more difficulty in sifting all the information they've gathered to a way that we understand it, the non-dyslexic people. Which I know everybody gathering a lot of information has to do that, but I do think it's harder for dyslexic people. And there's the sequencing, which other people, obviously, people who aren't dyslexic, as I've said, would sequence it in one way, and you get these gaps, and then you have to do some work to fill the gaps so the rest of us can understand it. So actually, it's possibly not a problem for the dyslexic person. It might be a bit like a problem for the rest of us. That we should change the way we think. But most of all, I think, one of her problems is that she thinks so rapidly, and she talks so rapidly, and the ideas come tumbling out, and sometimes it's quite hard for her to either slow herself down enough to get them down on paper, or even slow herself down enough so that she can explain them to us. So sometimes we would work on her explaining what it was she wanted to say, and me saying, so you mean so-and-so? And she said, no. So there was a bit of that going on. And what was interesting, I thought, was that she, when she came back from Chicago, where she'd been doing the paper, she said it was absolutely great because she had jet lag and it slowed her thought processes down so that she could actually put them into a form that we could understand. And I thought that was great.
Prior to starting her PhD, Emma was very aware of her dyslexia, and she'd used the support services provided through the university, so I think she knew what to expect. So she probably came in with more of an informed approach of what was available to her, and she made maximum use of all that was available to her. I remember when she came in.
It's accentuated a key characteristic that I have observed in a lot of design PhDs, which is the use of visual strategies. I haven't actually come across anyone who's used the idea of visual mapping, visual documentation, as much as Emma has. Perhaps that's due to her difficulty with the written text. Emma uses visual mapping particularly during conversation with either a supervisor or with her peers or her advisors. And I've never really encountered anyone doing it that way. So what she normally does is she records a conversation, but she uses conversation as a kind of sounding piece so that she rehearses what she has to write and clarify what her points are. She does it visually by mapping out the conversation, but also before she starts the conversation, sometimes she has already some diagrams up on the wall, on the table, so that we can start having a conversation about those processes straight away, and those ideas straight away. I think it was just, from my observation, refinement of her strategies. So she has, I think she was aware at the start of a PhD of certain challenges that she might face. So one of them is obviously the written part of it, but also the point of translating her ideas in a clear way through written form. So we started a lot more conversationally rather than visually. So we might have a conversation, she might go away and map it out and come back with reflection. But I think how I've seen that develop or refine was that she began, almost using it as prompts. So she would draw out the process, we'll have a conversation around it, she would document the conversation visually, and then reflect on it visually. So it's kind of, the process has been kind of refined and almost to a point where it's performing the best it can for Emma to get the most out of it. And also
what I've noticed most is the way she'll map things. If she's having trouble putting something into words or explaining it to me, because I know nothing about the field, so she really has to explain it to me. When she'll say, oh, just a minute, I'll draw it, and she draws it, and it does become immediately much easier to understand. And I noticed that when she does that, it also seems to clear her thought processes as well a bit. Or maybe it doesn't clear them because it must have always been there, but it perhaps condenses them into something that's a bit easier to represent.
The observations I've noticed in the changes the way she's developed is, one, obviously she works very closely with a dyslexia tutor to improve her English. I think on reflection, I think Emma spent quite a bit of time researching how to write, so she's actually done quite a bit of research on writing styles. I think thirdly, when you become quite connected and start reading papers and books on a daily basis, you become familiar with the styles that are acceptable within those publications. And finally, I think there's a definite connection between the actual confidence with the subject matter and the confidence with the writing, because you become more confident, you become less precious with what you keep and what you throw away.
I think Emma obviously learned how her writing can improve and learned strategies to check it herself before sending a draft to her advisors or her tutors. I mean, I used to remember receiving documents from Emma which is quite hard work, quite hard to read through and quite hard to understand. And I think she quickly realized that a PhD is a long process, and if she's going to be, I suppose, relying on supervisors or friends or peers to help read and edit and proofread or give comments, that she'll have to at least be very clear about what she sends out in terms of the draft. So it's nearer to a completed version rather than just a first round. So I think over the few years, she's learned to edit and go through the process a lot of times before, and then being able to develop strategies to realize that's the best you can get, that's as clear as you can get before sending it out to people to read. So definitely, I think that's the biggest change I see.
So she's refined the way that she's presented the information, so now a lot of it comes in tables and maps and things like that, which I think makes it much easier for people to understand, and also you can get an awful lot of information down in a lot less space, can't you?
I can't define a specific attitude or skill that Emma's adopted to improve her writing, other than the attitude of determination. I think when we all encounter a problem about trying to communicate something, when we think it's really important to say it, we eventually find a way around the best method to communicate it. Having taught Emma as an undergraduate, her strength was through her ideas and the way she communicated that through her practical work. It took time to develop a voice, a written voice, for expressing the same answers to more difficult questions. But through determination, she found a voice, and I think by the end of it, she's communicated her ideas in the written context very effectively.
I'd say it's both. However, you do have to develop the right attitude first in order to develop the skills. The attitude really is about understanding what you're good at and what you're not good at, and being self-aware, self-conscious about what are the skills that you might be lacking, and be very explicit about how you improve that. But also, I think in terms of the writing skills and researching skills, it's something that you need to be able to be open-minded about and be able to kind of pick it up and ensure that you keep practicing on. I mean, writing, for example, you can very easily lose that skill if you don't carry on writing after the PhD. And I think, again, that's something Emma, having conversations with her, she's well aware of that, and she's, you know, she has the right attitude to be able to realize that that's something that she has to keep going and keep practicing on. So again, it's about providing yourself that kind of strategy to ensure that you keep those skills up to date.
I think it's a mixture of the two. You know, without the right attitude, you're not going to develop the right skills, really. And Emma's been very sort of professional in the way that she's sought to improve all of the aspects of her research, context and process.
Basically, she's obviously extremely intelligent and very creative. So that's a lovely start, isn't it? But you can be those things and not achieve what Emma's achieved. And the reason I think she's achieved what she has is that she's capable of exceptionally hard work, as I just said. Yeah. And she's very determined to do it and to get it right. And to put a point across so that the rest of us can understand things better. So that seems to me a great way to work.